Captain Grant Coppin with Texas Fishing Tips, and this is your weekly fishing report.
All right, this week we've been catching some good trout over here along Laguna shores. The tide finally came back up, which is nice. Been catching them up here, kind of, I say flooded, but during the low tide, this is pretty shallow, but during the high tide, I can drift all the way up to the land. So I've just been making long drifts all the way up to the shore, turn around, run back to the channel, and drift back all the way to the shore. Just all through here, catching good trout. Remember, they got to be 17 inches, but there's plenty of those over here. Lots of 15 and 16 inches too, but got to throw those back. And catching a scattered red or two along the islands. And for the most part, these trout have been in here pretty much all spring. It's just now that the tide has come up, seems like there's a whole lot more of them. Over here in Deadbands, there's been a big school of drum and redfish both in here. I've come over here several times and tried to get on them. And there's a few boats that have been coming in here and really corralling them up. So they're a little bit spooky, but they're in here. So if you're over here on like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday kind of deal, I wouldn't recommend coming in here on the weekend. But if you want to come in here, get up in your tower or get up on your console, look at these fish, look for the mud, and you'll find those fish popping corks and shrimp for the reds, or just a free-lined shrimp with a split shot in the drum, because those drum are more stationary. The schools don't move as fast. Those redfish, it seems like once you see them, they're on the run. And sometimes what I saw this past week is the drum and the reds together. I'd throw in the school of drum and I'd catch a redfish. It's kind of weird, but there are some fish in here, and I wouldn't recommend coming in here on the weekend, but middle of the week's a good time to come in here and get away from the boats and catch some good fish. Now that the tide's come up, these humps right here have got fish on them. Over here, these humps have got fish on them. This little scar right here has got fish on it. Basically, the pattern you want to look for when the tide comes up, the tide gets high, is everything that was normally sticking out of the water is now submerged or got just enough water to float over the top of it. That's where all the fish are going to be. So all these islands around the edges of them, tight to the structure, and that wind is your friend. So it'll pack them up against those little scars and spots that are normally exposed, now covered with water. So there you go. There's a good amount of territory to cover. If you cover all of that I covered in yellow, you're going to catch a lot of fish. Over here on East Clayburg Point, been catching good numbers of fish, both good trout and drum and sheephead all through here. Typically, I like to fish over here on this side of the rocks, but boy, is that a popular spot. So what I recommend is, because that spot is so overfished, if you can come over here and find a rock off by yourself, this is where you're going to find more fish. I came over here the other day. There was a boat right next to me. He got his limit of trout. I pulled in there, got my limit of trout, and we went along our way. But we respected each other's water. He called me in. I caught the fish, and it was just good because there weren't as many boats on this side of the rock. So come in here, find you a rock. Even if you come down here off the point and come down along here, there's rocks all through here. You can just do some rock hopping until you find one that's hot. But you can also do what I call is heating up a rock. If you go in and you find a rock that's in a nice position and you throw out and you don't catch anything right off the bat, don't just leave it. Sit there for another 5-10 minutes. Be patient, because that rock eventually will get visited by a few fish. And if you keep making, some racket and, get their attention, then that rock will automatically become hot. We've been catching all our fish on popping corks with long leaders and doing really well, getting good mixed bags of trout, drum, reds, and sheephead. Okay, last week I put it in the report. It's just as good last week as this week. Kennedy Shoreline catching lots of trout, uh, lots of redfish. Redfish are tight to the shore. Um, a buddy of mine actually caught some reds up in the rocks, way up in the rocks. Boat almost sitting on the shore. He caught them up in here, and we've been catching some good black drum mixed in, a couple of sheephead. It's just a really good springtime spot. So come down here, get on the shoreline, get up in here. There's so much territory, so even when it is covered with boats, you can still find a spot or territory to come in, catch a few fish, and have a good time enjoying the day. When the tide comes up, they're going to be tighter to the rocks. When the tide goes down, they're going to be further out towards the drop-off.
Captain Grant Coppin, thanks for watching.